Okay, here's a quick run-through of the examples that Dr. Mohan presented in the special session on September 9th. So the first example was to design and build a virtual instrument that will add two integers entered by the user, display the result, and indicate whether or not the result is even or odd. So I'm going to show you how to do this in LabVIEW, but first let me go over the main features. Of course, in LabVIEW, we have a front panel and the block diagram are the two essential elements. On the front panel, we can put controls and indicators, and you see that I have both. On the left, I have two numeric controls that indicate the two numbers we're adding, and on the right, we have a numeric indicator that indicates the sum, and a couple of LEDs that will light up depending on whether or not the result is even or odd. So that's the front panel. For the block diagram, what happens is when we put the indicators and controls in, they automatically show up in the block diagram, and we need to connect them with functions. And so the main ones you'll see here is the first one to the left, where we take X and Y. We add those two results together. We connect the output to the sum indicator. And then in order to determine whether they're even or odd, there's a function that gives us quotient and remainder. And so we connect the remainder output. We divide the result by 2. And if the remainder is 0, we want to light up the indicator that says it's even. And if it's odd, that is, the remainder is not equal to 0, then we can light up the odd. And there are other ways to do this. You could check to see if it's greater than 0 or less or equal to 0. The other thing I want to point out is when you put in the indicators, you can specify that they are integers, and we'll see that when I open up the LabVIEW.
Okay, so let's look to see how we start to put together this virtual instrument in LabVIEW. When you launch LabVIEW, you'll see this splash window that allows you to create a new blank virtual instrument. This will give you a window, which is a front panel window that you can use then to build your virtual instrument. So if I right-click in this window, we can add controls. And what we want to do is we want to add a couple of numeric controls. And we'll do another one. And you can place them wherever you want. If you double-click on the label, you can label them what you want, X, for example, and Y. And let's see what the representation is. They're double precision floating point numbers. Let's say we want them to be integers. So let's do the same one with this one. Let's make them integers. And now we're also going to create an indicator. Numeric indicator. Again, this is a sum, so this is also going to be an integer representation. And then we need two Boolean indicators. Let's use round LEDs. And let's add one more. And again, you can name those. You can change the properties. For example, this one is off, this color when it's off, and then it changes color when it's on to a brighter green. Let's change this one to more of a red. So we do that by going into Properties. And when the Properties window comes up, for this second one, let's click on, and let's pick a bright red for when it's on. And for off, you've got this Tools palette down here. You can pick any color you want. I'm going to pick one that I've picked before. Off. Okay. So now that's how it looks. You could line these up and so on, but let's skip that for now. The other thing I'm going to do is I want to add a label to this. So let's search for labels. Here's label. Let me just drag that over here. And we can give our instrument a title by typing in that label. Even, odd, test. And I can change the text properties of that if I like. I can make it bigger. I can make it bold. I can make it bigger. Again, I can move that around. And so we're pretty much done now with the front panel. Now let's move to the block diagram. You can always click Control-E to switch to the block diagram. So that brings the block diagram to the front. Let me move these out of the way. So we see now our controls and our numeric indicator and our Boolean indicators. So what we want to do is we want to build the instrument and the connections between these two areas. So the first thing we want to do is we want to add a sum block here, so adding blocks. So let me go into the search menu. Notice this is now functions instead of controls and indicators, since we're in the block diagram. So let's look for add. And so let's do a numeric add. It doesn't matter which one of these. I'm just going to drag that guy over here. And then I'm going to add the numbers. So when I put the cursor near the output of the numeric control, it gives me a wire, and then I just wire this up to the top terminal of the add block. Notice there's a context-sensitive help, so it tells us what the block does. And then we're going to do the same thing with the second terminal here. So the output of that is going to be the sum. So we're going to do two things with that. One is we're going to drive this numeric indicator that's going to give us the sum of the two numbers. And then what we want to do is determine whether we have odd or even. So let's look for the remainder. Quotient and remainder. Let's drag that over here. And so if we put, we're going to divide by 2. I'm going to right click on this input, and I'm going to create a constant of 2, and I'm going to make that an integer. Also, integer. And I'm going to connect this to my sum block. Okay, now I need one more thing. Let me move these over a little bit here. I need to test this remainder, so I'm going to put in a couple comparison blocks. So let's look for this under functions. Let's look for a arithmetic and comparison. And so let's put in a comparison. And let's say if it's equal to 0, if the remainder is equal to 0, then we're going to turn on the even one. Let's change this while we're at it. And if it's not equal to 0, we're going to turn on the odd one. And so then you just finish these connections. I'll leave you to do that on your own. So now we've switched back to the front panel, and we're going to see what happens when we run this virtual instrument. Let's first input a couple of numbers here. Let's put in 3 in this one and 7 in that one, and then we're going to run it by using this white arrow. Turns out that the sum is 10, and it's an even number. Let's try it again. This time let's increment this by 1 to 4. This time we should get an odd number. And again, we do get that. So that's how you run a virtual instrument.